Our next game is the Pandora Directive, or I guess you could also call it Tex Murphy 4 to be technical.
I don't think anyone really they just call it the Pandora Directive, really.
I thought it was Tex Murphy, a Pandora Directive.
That's right. That's the full name. No one.
I'm not sure they ever really put the name on the boxes until Overseer, but that's just me.
So I mean, because it's Tex Murphy. There's no doubt about that. It's Tex Murphy. That's the key of it. It's only the 4th game?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people thought it was the 2nd game, but those people were confused and brought up in broken homes, I guess.
Well,
I think the people that were brought up in broken homes were the people that had to play the earlier Tex Murphys.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, you're right. I've got it backwards.
Should we talk about the series pedigree such as it is for a little bit?
Yeah, gladly. I mean, basic catch of Tex Murphy is that it's a sort of neo-noir set in future San Francisco. The title character, Tex himself, kind of a goofus, kind of a washout, but he's persistent. He's got a good heart, even if he's full of snark. The Tex Murphy that most people know was formed by the 3rd game, Under a Killing Moon. The first 2, Mean Streets and Martian Memorandum, they just kind of faded out into the wayside because they took place before Under a Killing Moon adopted full-motion video technology and became a full-on adventure game. The first 2 games didn't look quite as nice and also had some segments that are not adventure games. At least I only mostly remember that Mean Streets required you to physically drive everywhere, and it was a real Byzantine nightmare just trying to navigate, like the car controls are...
Admittedly, if you had the manual handy, you barely even needed to drive at all, because what the game doesn't tell you is you can just dial in coordinates and the car does it automatically.
Well, I think what you have with all these games is that they're all interesting technical pieces. The team behind them seem to really have an interest in sort of making a game bigger and richer and more interesting than its contemporaries, because they put flying car segments and action segments, and it almost never works until Under a Killing Moon, where they went, all right, forget everything, forget all of that garbage. Let's make it an adventure game. Also, it's first person, and that's a very, very short, small genre, especially when Under a Killing Moon came out. I think it came out before Normality.
It was only slightly after The Seventh Guest came out, I think.
And then that was followed up by the game that we're going to be talking about, which is the Pandora Directive, which more or less is Under a Killing Moon, like in terms of engine and stuff, but refined in all the right places, and obviously with pretty much a completely different story. It is a direct continuation, though. It's kind of set, Weasel, you might know the exact time, but it's set shortly after Under a Killing Moon, if I remember correctly.
I think it's only about a year or so after. It's enough time that Tex has had a chance to remodel his entire office, at least.
And I think some of the characters have changed or gotten older, which is one of the cool things about the Pandora Directive. Because this is an adventure game, let's talk about what is the Pandora Directive? What is the gameplay? You play as Tex Murphy in neo-noir, which is not cyberpunk. I think that's really important. The Tex Murphy games aren't cyberpunk. They're kind of this own weird little space that they occupy in terms of future fantasy.
No, they basically look like a 20th century production. There's not too much indication that it takes place in the future. Just like the only really noticeable thing is that some characters have prosthetic makeup that make them look like mutants. Like I forget how
they are supposed to be mutants. I don't think they're just mutant enthusiasts.
We haven't looked at any full motion video games before, have we? I guess Riven
we looked at Sewer Shock.
Oh yeah, of course.
And that's more FMV than you really need.
The games that you'd rather forget.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did for a while.
This is probably, let's be honest, the best FMV adventure game you're ever going to find.
Yes.
I would say it's debatable.
Outside of the sequels.
It's definitely one of the most coherent. Tex Murphy doesn't take FMV and go, we could just stuff it full of FMV and it'll be a better game. They don't do that. They're like, no, let's use
they
FMV.
Design the FMV around the game instead of vice versa.
So you have all these like little FMV vignettes where it's just like, oh, here's a little scene that happens, constantly like little bits and pieces that happen. Characters all talk to you. I believe because that in Unreal Killing Moon it was mostly static things. In this one, there's a lot more like movement when characters talk to you.
Yeah, even Under Killing Moon still had the full motion video conversations, but it was extremely obvious the way they had it streamed off of the CD, because if somebody wasn't talking, they just randomly turn into a cardboard cutout on the screen. They are not moving at all. But in Pandora Directive, everything is always in motion. It's much nicer as a result. The video quality has improved dramatically just from that alone.
The world feels a bit more alive. That's an important thing, actually, about the series. When they took it to this first-person perspective, they kind of lampshade that the world is actually kind of unoccupied in a way because there's like a pollution or some sort of thing happened, if I remember correctly, like with the mutants and stuff.
The
radioactive
out of
it's actually yeah.
So yeah, like they try and cover up for the fact that you walk around mostly empty streets. Like there's like a person or two sort of hanging out.
Yeah, the street preacher. I want to dwell on that guy. Did you come across that crazy maniac who babbles about like red meat and grains or whatever? He kept rolling his R's. I just found that really hilarious. I mean, it's
the performances in this are really good. I don't want to say that they're like top-notch performances in terms of like give that man an Oscar. Just no, like they fit and they're very fun and lively, which is what you want. You know, it's fun.
I'm sort of abiding from the Hardcore Gaming 101 article on Tex Murphy when I say this, but they work because they realize what they are. They're not trying to be po-faced about storytelling. Now, there's always a sort of hint of cheesiness and self-awareness and how everyone acts. And that's why they don't so well.
These games don't entirely take themselves seriously for what they're doing, how they do FMV. That's really a plus in their favor.
Yeah, compared to stuff like Phantasmagoria, which more or less had the same feeling to it, although much less intentionally.
I would say, in some ways, Phantasmagoria 2 clicks into that same sort of field, because that's a game that kind of is really wacky, and it kind of fits a little better because it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, like the disco dancing mental patient, and the Easter egg where Batman shows up in the psychiatrist's office.
I remember hearing about that.
Does anyone want to tell me about the plot of the game? Like, what is Tex doing in this game?
Well, it begins at a cafe where Tex gets a job from Gordon Fitzpatrick, who is played by UHF's R.J. Fletcher. Kevin McCarthy is his name, actually. And it's a missing persons case. So you get sent to his log cabin, I believe, somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. And while you can only barely find any traces of where this missing person went, you do unearth a metric buttload of material about the 1947 Roswell UFO crash, and it just kind of spirals out of control from there.
The X-Files was popular.
Yeah, it kind of came from the era where it was still really cool to make your plotline be in, around, or about Area 51 in any form whatsoever.
When did that stop exactly? I'm kind of wondering now when that wasn't cool anymore.
I mean, it wasn't after the 90s, I would say. Like, once you sort of hit the 2000s, it became very...
We kind of still had some vestiges of that towards the early 2000s. Because there was that PS2 and Xbox game, Area 51, and even...
I think that was like the, that was like the point where people were just like, this is silly, this is dumb, what are you doing? So it's a conspiracy, and you track a conspiracy across many locations. This game, is the largest Tex Murphy game by far. I personally haven't played the Tesla Effect. I assume it is as big, but...
give or take a little bit. The locations are bigger, but it feels like there are fewer of them.
Okay. But this game definitely is, it's almost a globe-trotting adventure, which is a little weird for a Tex Murphy game. You know, you expect a sort of noir game to take place in a city, I think, or like a city and a place. But this game sends you in a lot of directions. You know, you go to a cabin, you go to many locations of the city, you actually go to their interpretation of Area 51, which personally, I didn't enjoy that part of the game. It was very frustrating to figure out. You go to corporate headquarters. You go to a lot of places in this game, if I remember, all the different pieces, without spoiling where you end up at the end, because it's kind of like, oh, this is getting a little weird for me. But this game's in first person, so how does that work?
This game is actually interesting as it uses its own unique 3D engine. It's a little bit more detailed than Doom, maybe somewhere just between Doom and Quake. It's got some really nice textures, but you don't have as much screen size as a trade-off.
Yeah, how many like full roaming 3D adventure games were there like at this time? For some reason, the only other one I can think of is Normality. Speaking of the '90s, but
yeah, you could argue Realms of Haunting, even though that one's a bit more of an action game. What was another one? The other one I can think of is Azrael's Tear, but I think that came out a year later.
Gotcha.
It was Azrael's Tear was also again. I think it was again a more of an action-y game. I think you did get to shoot things and stuff.
Yeah, it feels like there should have been more games like this. Like, the only other one I can say is Hotel Dusk, and that was many years later.
I guess there was just sort of an overarching decision that you did not waste time on your real-time 3D engine if you weren't making a game that needed to be real-time 3D.
This just certainly feels slightly like I think games like this are coming back now that, you know, with ubiquity of like Unity and Unreal, where you can quite literally drag and drop your own first-person adventure game, super easy.
Oh, yes.
I hate to be a troll here, but would Tex Murphy be considered a walking simulator nowadays? The answer is no. Never say that for them.
No, absolutely not.
I mean, and the reason it wouldn't be considered a walking simulator, this game is devious as all hell. It's so complicated and so, like, tricky. They went, you know what? Let's put in our own complete hint system. This game literally tells you how to beat it. That's how difficult this game can be.
Even if you don't use the hint system, it comes complete with several save games at various key points in the game, so you could just skip portions entirely if you have to.
I believe what they were trying to do was make it more palpable for people who don't really play games, who just kind of want to get a new CD-ROM drive and show off, which isn't a bad thing to do, really.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because most people know that the catch of graphic adventure games is that's mostly about the plot, the characters, the art, everything but the game itself.
And even past that, I can't remember if it's Pandora Directive or the immediate sequel, Overseer, but they introduced a difficulty switch that goes between game mode and entertainment mode. Where entertainment mode will either completely skip over the harder puzzles or let you try them anyway, but outright tell you a cheat code to skip them if you get frustrated.
Nice. It sounds like an evolution of what Monkey Island 2 and 3 did, because they had a normal mode and then a harder, more puzzles mode.
Or as Monkey Island 2 put it, easy mode for children and video game magazine reviewers.
You kind of have like two modes. You have your interaction mode, which works like your standard adventure game with a bunch of verbs. And you have like a movement mode, and they are kept entirely separate, so you have to kind of switch between them a lot. And it gets a little bit clunky from time to time, to be honest.
Oh, because of the mouse steering and all of that?
Right, yeah, I could be wrong, but I don't think you can move the keyboard.
Yeah, the keyboard controls are pretty much limited to raising and lowering your eye level. Because to get around, you basically have to push the mouse as if it's a virtual joystick with no spring tension. So if you push the mouse too far forward, Tex starts taking off at a full-bore run, and you can't stop him at all without hitting the space bar to go back to interactive mode.
I mean, I would say that their controls, they try. You know, they try to give you a balance between different.
Yeah, but given that there are some segments of the game where walking into the wrong part of the area will get you killed, that can be a bit of a problem.
Yes, this game, it doesn't have shooting. You can't shoot things, but there are segments where things basically will kill you, which is not necessarily ideal. Thematically, I found that was a little silly that Tex never draws, like, he drew a gun in previous games, but in this game you never actually, really draw a gun and shoot at things, even though you're like a private eye, that kind of feel, whereas almost at all occasions, like, Tex will occasionally, like, get into, like, a fist fight with someone.
Well, they kind of justified that a little in Under a Killing Moon, where if you try and take his gun, he starts playing around with it in the office and accidentally throws it out the window, and some kid picks it up and runs off with it. After shooting his hat off, of course, because and that gun hasn't shown up ever since.
I guess it's their way of sending off the fact that their action segments were not great, and clearly the engine is not built for it. This game does have a few multiple ending things going on. It's got like a little bit of a little extra stuff going on where you can play the game in slightly different ways, and you'll get a different ending. It's a ending based on kind of how you approach situations rather than specific checkboxes like, find this item, find that item, and you'll get this ending. No, it's not like that. You actually kind of get to play it.
It actually kind of ranks you based on what kind of person Tex is, because your best ending is basically Tex is completely selfless. He's a saint. He does everything for everybody and never talks back. And then you've got the worst ending, appropriately titled Boulevard of Broken Dreams, where Tex is a complete asshole, thinks only of himself, does things like never returns wallets that he finds on the street and just keeps the money in them, or makes fun of everybody he talks to at every occasion.
And those are not good endings that you get. I don't want to spoil what you get, but holy heck, you do not want those endings.
I don't think even BioWare ever got that harsh.
The BioWare approach would probably be, I don't know, the game interface turns red if you're being a jerk. That's about all they do.
What it actually reminds me of, the Boulevard of Broken Dreams endings are almost literally the rock falls, everybody dies RPG, sort of like frustrated DM where it's like, stop being an asshole!
I forget, isn't there a way to tell in-game if you're going down a bad path?
There is a cheat code that tells you what you've done and what ending you're going towards.
But otherwise, you can't really know that in advance. Interesting.
Well, yeah. I think the game might warn you that you've kind of got to, you got a little bit of control about what kind of ending you get.
It's been a while since I invested a lot of time in this game, but I seem to recall that there are points where Tex will just say something to the effect of, maybe that could have gone a little better. But it's better than how they handled it in Under a Killing Moon, where there was only one ending, and failing a conversation with anybody just meant you had to repeat the conversation.
Which is kind of a more classic adventure game technique, where it's just like, well, if you don't do it properly, you have to do it again. Like, that's
which is still better than the Martian Memorandum school of conversation, where it's entirely possible to say the wrong thing and make the game unwinnable.
And that's why the sequel to the Pandora Directive is not a game that is actually a sequel. It is a remake of the first game because of how kind of awful the first game is in a lot of ways. They tried to redo it. Unfortunately, due to licensing and a bunch of crap, all games after that kind of fell apart until they kickstarted it a few years ago. That's the story of Tex. Does anyone have anything else to say before we move on to trying to rank this game?
Pixel hunting is the worst.
Especially in 3D, where your pixels can change sizes.
I guess we should preface this. The acting, the atmosphere of the game, it's all hilarious. Full marks there. But it's an adventure game, and I can't think of any adventure game, even in the ones I like, that rise above some of the negative conventions of the genre, let's say, and sadly, Pandora Directive, even if arguably the best of the series, is no different.
The thing is, it's very much not on rails like most FMV adventure games, and that's kind of a plus and a minus.
I'd say it's more of a plus in my opinion, because while it's a lot easier to just completely overlook a vital thing you need to do, it's a lot more fun to wander around and just look at everything and listen to Tex snark about random stuff in the background.
In true adventure game tradition, they do put in plenty of stuff for Tex to fiddle around with, you know. Even when you're going in the wrong direction, Tex will give you, not feedback on what you're supposed to do, but just like a little bit of levity to be like, haha, yeah, okay, let's keep going. That being said, I mean, I don't know where anyone else is going to try and put this game. I'm interested in whether the hint system inclusion is a good thing or a bad thing in the context of the game's design.
I'm really mulling over that myself. I mean, on one hand, it's nice they put it in there. On the other, that it's even there in the first place kind of has the developers say, yeah, maybe we were kind of overboard in the puzzle and pixel hunting and all that.
I think it's more that they acknowledge that they're making the money off of the game and not pessimistically making the money off of the hint line.
I do think that is a good effort that they clearly, like, I mean, if we look at something like Riven, the sequel to Myst, Riven, the sequel to Myst, definitely sold a lot of strategy guides. I have no doubt about that in my mind. And
until
Myst
they
sold
started bundling the strategy guide with the game.
Huge piles of, so I think that is a consumer-friendly, this is a very consumer-friendly game. Like, they looked at their fan base and went, what are our fans like? Our fans are insane. They don't even, like, how do they solve these puzzles? They're horrible. And then, but they also go, well, let's also make sure that people who aren't fans of Tex can actually get into and play the game. I think that's a positive, you know.
Yeah.
You can't necessarily please everybody, but it's about the closest you can get to pleasing your hardcore fans while also not kind of, you know, making the game unapproachable to non-fans.
But I have a further curveball question just before we rank this. If it is because on the strength of primarily its script that Tex Murphy is so well revered, could it have been like a movie or a miniseries? Like, what justifies it being a video game?
I mean, I always felt that this is a game that very much does feel like they kind of wanted to make a movie. You know, sometimes you can see that in productions where it's like, oh, they probably just wanted to make a movie, but for some reason they couldn't make a movie. They started making games, and then the FMV era started, and they're like, hey, cool, we can, you can make a game that's a movie, and we wanted to make a movie, so let's just do that. Let's try and make a movie game.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because, you know, since it did start out pretty straightforward as a graphic adventure for the first two games, then, like, if they started Tex Murphy when FMV games were still a thing, I wonder if they would have actually shot even higher. But it's a very interesting blending of the mediums, I'd say. It's not quite one, it's not quite another, but it's created something very interesting, and as we've agreed, certainly among the better tier, if not the best, of FMV gaming.
Is this better or worse than Full Throttle?
That's what I've been thinking about. It's a lot longer, definitely.
Where I, as a devoted Tex Murphy fan, would say is I would actually put it below Full Throttle, because while I definitely like Tex as a character better, I feel that Full Throttle is just a more consistently good game. And is also much less willing to just spontaneously kill you and make you reload a saved game.
Okay, well, if that's the case, then if I may pitch out for a ranking between UN Squadron and Armed Police Batrider, because UN Squadron is like our baseline center at the for so many games lately.
I'm okay with that if everyone else is.
As I don't have the rankings in front of me, I think I'm just going to agree on principle, just to make things less complicated.
It's on the upper half of the list, like upper mid, let's say.
I would say that Full Throttle is better because I feel it's a bit tighter, a bit more narratively cohesive, more cinematic. Like, I'd almost say that Full Throttle would make a better movie than Tex would, to be honest.
That's a good point.
I think it's important, like, Tex is a game that it's got a lot of content in it. It's quite a long game. It's got quite a few puzzles, quite a few things to do. It has movie bits, but it is quite a lengthy game. They made the 3D engine, so they're like, okay, well, let's actually use this engine to game. Full Throttle is very much just like, it could have been an hour-long, like, movie easily. Yeah, this is a tricky one, because Pandora Directive is held by, I think, many people as one of the best point-and-click style games. Not technically a point-and-click, but, it is one of the better games in that genre. So it's a difficult one, I think, to place. I think that you're not... I don't think you're wrong. Like, it's a tough one because I think that even though it's quite good, I think it has a lot of filler, having said that. If you want like a kind of lengthy but somewhat bloated game, this one's very, very good, considering that a lot of adventure games I don't think shoot for longer than kind of like, if you know what you're doing in an adventure game, I don't think it'll take you more than like 30 minutes to an hour. The first run through a game will take you hours, days,
weeks.
Yeah,
that's exactly how they were made. If you replay them, it's usually just because you want to enjoy the setting again, and the plot and how that develops. But even if you know what you're doing in text, it could take like more than 5 hours or so. I don't know. It might be a little over much.
I guess it depends how much you're speed running and how much you're just talking to all of the characters and sort of still experiencing the game properly.
I imagine there's a lot you could really skip if you wanted to, unless you're going like for full points. And why would you do that?
Full points means you can't use the hints, which is very, very frustrating.
Yeah, like unless you were raised on Infocom games where the points actually kind of mattered. The points are basically disposable, because, I mean, they give them to you for triggering the stupid little one-off gags. How important could they be?
I mean, I think maybe we should put it above Quirk. That's my...
Okay, it's still below Full Throttle in that case, and it gets a little elevated. Alright, I'm okay between Sin and Punishment and Quirk if Weasel and Bob are.
And the reason is, I do think this game shoots incredibly high, and unlike a lot of... There are a lot, and I do mean there's like 10s, 20s of adventure games from this like 96-ish period that are like, let's be the biggest, best game we can, and they're horrible. They're absolutely horrible. You could just you just never touch any of them again. Like, like something like the Space Bar, I think that might be 97 or 98, but, it's like, they're huge, and they got all these voice actors and all this stuff, and the whole game is horrible. It's abysmal. You can't play them. This game is playable, and it shoots really high, and it sits up there, it doesn't... Most of the problems with text are kind of like, but we address that by giving you hints and stuff, like... It's very coherent for what it is, which is surprising. I think that's why people like it, When you play text, you don't have to play text because, I want to experience the story. You can play text because, it's actually a pretty good game that also has a good story and good characters and stuff, which...
Or you play text because you want to spend an hour and a half having him look at every single thing in his office because it's fun.
This isn't going to convert anyone to, like, I love adventure games because I play Tex Murphy. But if you like adventure games and haven't played Tex Murphy, especially Pandora Directive, I also think Under the Killing Moon, I like that one's plot a little better. But, like those two games, they're really, really great as far as adventure games go. And, maybe Full Throttle's kind of more of a must-play because it's kind of a lighter, condensed experience that's kind of, a little bit shorter, a little bit more focused. But it's still a great game.
It has a lot less cruft to it.
Yeah, like people accuse Full Throttle being too short. That's fair. I would accuse Pandora Directive of being too long, and I think that's fair. But I do think they sit at approximately the same general area of entertainment. But on the other hand, like Sin and Punishment, I don't know if I would say it's better than Sin and Punishment. So, that's where I'm putting it.
Hey,
personally, I say it would be very slightly better than Sin and Punishment. But only because I kind of had trouble with that one, controls-wise.
I want to sit it between...
That's a different argument.
Just above Quirk. I think that's a good place for it.
Yeah, between Sin and Punishment and Quirk sounds like the agreement we've elevated it 2 places above my original suggestion. So I am happy to go with that and wrap this segment up.
Sweet, let's hope Xerxes shows up for the next one.